right. We are live with James Charles of E-Impact Marketing. How are you, James?
Great. Yeah, good to be here. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Really appreciate you coming on. So I'm excited to get into all things SEO, digital marketing, how AI is changing our world. But do you mind giving a quick introduction, not just yourself, but the firm itself, maybe a little story here or there of how things got to where they are?
Yeah, sure. Um, it's 10 years this year actually, which is kind of
Wow.
crazy to believe. Yeah, 2015 we started. So little backstory. Chris, who was the company founder, he was part of his family construction business. So they specialized in storage sheds, like backyard sheds, put the lawnmower and that kind of stuff in. So it was a family business. He was helping running it. He was overseeing their marketing stuff and really enjoyed that kind of thing. And so at a certain point, they decided some of the family members were going to divest, and he decided to take the marketing and spin it out as sort of a third party. So the family business was kind of the first client, and they were seeing pretty good success. So began picking up other clients in that industry, and he started in his backyard in a shed actually.
No, no
So
way.
I think it was like a little 6 by 10 shed. And I think they got up to like three people. The first three people were there in like this little 60 square foot shed in the backyard. So I joined in 2019. By that point, we'd upgraded. We were in a converted one car garage attached to the house. So
Wow,
we
big
were
upgrade.
we were making
Yeah.
moves. Yeah,
You were making
yeah.
moves,
So I,
baby.
yeah, so I joined there, yeah, year four or so, and I've been there since then. So yeah, it's grown from the shed. We actually still have the shed now. We've moved it into the backyard of our headquarters as well, and kind of put AC in it, and it's sort of like a little work pod to this day. But we have our main location is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and then we have a office with a team here in Brooklyn, New York, which is where I'm based out of.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love the shed in the back, the homage to our humble beginnings. It keeps everyone grounded, probably in let's not forget, where we came from.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. So, and you started your career, or you had a long run as a photographer. Would love to hear the journey from, and one, did that make you a better marketer, a good eye for marketing? But two, how did you move from, hey, I'm going photographer, I'm going to do this digital marketing thing, and now you're a partner, and I'm assuming you run most of the show there at E Impact.
I help. It's a
Yeah,
team effort.
it's a team
Yeah.
effort.
So my background was not in marketing. Actually, quite a few of us, most of us, all of us partners actually, um, kind of learned by doing. None of us have a marketing degree or anything like that. We sort of just picked it up here and there, and one thing led to another. So my background, man, I've done quite a few different things. I grew up part of my childhood actually on a produce farm in Pennsylvania. So like working with my hands outside in the summer. And then excuse me. And then after I graduated high school, I got into doing construction. So the photography was sort of my side gig, part-time work. So I was, yeah, doing, landscape and outdoor was sort of my passion, and then portrait and wedding and that kind of stuff to pay the bills. Um, Unfortunately, the things that paid the bills weren't really my passion quite as much, and
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
kind of hard to really make it take off if you don't have like just the deep love of posing families and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So that was a side hustle. But it's really interesting now because as an agency, we work with a ton of construction companies. And so having been on the other side of that, I did roofing for a number of years. Was actually running like a roofing crew. I built decks for a while. And so being super hands-on and being able to like speak the language of clients while now kind of seeing the other side of things. Yeah, I feel like I was blessed to have experiences that kind of position me to bridge those worlds in a unique way.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'd love to hear about the capabilities and client focus. You said construction. Do you do a lot of these, service type businesses, SMBs? What is the core? And I love what you're saying about I had real world operating experience for these clients. I know what they're going through. That empathy, I'm sure, shines through at E Impact.
Yeah, so um, like I said, we got our start with the shed industry, and so once you demonstrate some level of success, it seems to attract
Yeah,
more
yeah,
people who
yeah.
want to get in on that.
Referral
So
business the
that's,
best. All the
yeah.
SEO, PPC in the world does not replace
Mhm.
referral. Yes.
Yeah. And so that industry is also, uh, it's heavily, um, it's heavily overlapped with a lot of the plain communities, so like Mennonite, Amish, and so there's
Okay.
really tight social connections. A lot of word of mouth gets around, and so if somebody is in the business, their brother in the next state over, their cousin is doing it, and so there's a ton of connections. It's a very large, relatively large industry from a dollar perspective, but amazingly tight knit in that everyone knows, within pretty much 2 degrees of connection, knows almost everyone else within the industry. Just a huge amount of overlap. Um, so that has been our single largest vertical. What's interesting is with that style of construction, people have started to figure out, hey, a pre-built structure that can be transported and set somewhere can be used for way more than just storing stuff. And so over the last number of years, you've seen that start to evolve to include dog kennels, chicken coops, greenhouses, and now even into residential stuff with tiny homes with modular housing. And so we've kind of branched out from there. We have a number of clients now that are getting into tiny homes, that are getting into modular
Mm.
housing stuff, um, ADUs out on the West Coast. And so, yeah, one thing leads to another. So that's sort of been our bread and butter. And then from there, some other styles of construction. So post frame construction is another really, well, it's been around for quite a while, but it's really moving into the residential space now as well with like the barn dominiums term. And
Mm.
so we're seeing a lot of growth in those, and especially just with the need for affordable housing in the US. That there's just so much potential for companies that are able to build residential housing in an affordable way. So as long as they can figure out how to mesh with local regulations, that's kind of the big sticking point. But there's huge demand across the country right now.
Well, there's so
I
many
don't know if I answered your
lessons.
question.
No, that's
I'm
great.
thinking about it.
Like I've never heard the term barn dominium. It looks like, yeah, I guess in Atlanta, we
Five
don't have a lot of those.
500,000 searches a month in the U.S. Yeah, it's a giant industry.
Let's go. I love
Yeah.
these riches in the niches, right? So like one, you have construction, but you even took that even further into the tiny homes, the sheds, the modular housing. And then like Mennonite, Quaker, like these are communities that just keep referring you business, but like you double down on these niches. There's got to be a lot of satisfaction being able to, not just from an operational point of view, being able to like, hey, we know it worked over here, we think it's going to work over here in a different market, this just really helps you, but like we know you, I mean, we're coming in as a strong referral. I mean, that's got to really
Yeah.
help you when you're thinking about customer success.
Yeah. Niching down is like, it's really a cliche, but I honestly don't think a lot of people hear it and they don't even niche down as far as they should.
Ship.
Like, so we've right now our two biggest verticals, like I said, are storage sheds and post frame construction. And like you said, you didn't even know the term barn dominium until we talked right now. But if I say, hey, we specialize in post frame companies, and I'm talking to a post frame builder, like suddenly their ears perk up a lot more than if it's your generic, hey, we'll optimize your Google listing, blah blah blah. I can say like, no, we sort of have a playbook that actually works for like exactly the type of business that you do. I can show you, somewhat redacted analytics results of companies that have almost an identical profile to you. They're carrying the same products, they're buying from the same suppliers. I know what you're doing. And picking two or three industries like that. Now, granted, these, like you said, you may not have heard of them, but these are multi-billion-dollar industries, sort of behind the
Yeah.
scenes. You pick a couple of those and get really, really good at running that playbook. And you can provide a lot of value for clients as well as standing out and being number one in that super specific area.
Oh, that's so great. I mean, we did the same thing. We had a really strong foothold in SaaS. But
Mhm.
even, I mean, you could have said, hey, SaaS, then we go B2B SaaS. And like that was too broad. We had to go into fintech and then we had to go into insurtech. And like specifically within these verticals, there are niches and stories and playbooks that work that these clients resonate with. I think that's a great way to
Mhm.
grow your business. The other thing I want to touch on, so your full service
Mhm.
websites, SEO, SEM, all performance marketing. You we had an email back and forth. You have a unique definition of marketing. I don't know if you wanted to unpack that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how unique it is, but I think it's really important to have a clear picture of what marketing is, because it really influences the type of strategies um, that you choose. Like, we are working with such a level of abstraction in our day-to-day work, right? We talk about SEOs, like, which is based on search engines, which is based on the internet, which is based on computing. Like, we're in this weird abstracted space on the internet, that's so separated, especially when you talk about construction, from the physical product that's being put in on someone's property. And so, like, what are we doing? We can get so focused on these specific strategies. At the end of the day, I think about, like, the economics term of a market, right? You have someone with a problem, and you got someone with a solution, and they're willing to do trade, right? So marketing is just bringing those two people into contact so that the market can exist. And when you think about that, like, from there, yeah, you choose strategies, you figure out what makes the most sense. There's lots of nuance to that. There's layers to that. But what happens sometimes, I think, in the marketing world, is we get so focused on advertising and CPM and this and that, and we lose sight of the focus that, like, there has to be a real problem that's being solved, and there has to be a real solution that's solving it. And as long as those two business fundamentals are in place, it's really just a question of bringing those two people into connection in a way that the person with the problem understands they have that problem, um, and understands how the solution is relevant to solving that problem. And as long as it's a problem that's painful enough that they're willing to pay money to solve it, right, you got yourself a business, and you're off to the races. So that's sort of where I even like to start with clients. Like, as we talk about this, is like, you know, you don't run into it as much if you're working with established businesses, because even though they might not have the language for it, they've already established, hey, we're solving a real problem. People are willing to pay us for
Hmm.
it. You get into trouble potentially more in the startup world, where people have this great idea, and maybe they run to the marketing agency before they've even really established great product market fit. I mean, I'm
Yep,
sure in SaaS, you run into this more.
a lot.
With construction, it's a little bit more straightforward, um, but it's still there, where anytime there's a dip in the market, people, you know, come to the marketing side and they're like, hey, why isn't this working? Why can't we just put more ad dollars in and, like, churn more results out? And it's like, no, there's underlying market forces which are affecting this. And if you're not solving a problem that's painful enough for people in this particular economic moment, they're not going to part with their hard-earned money to solve the problem, right? So either you got to figure out how to solve it better, you got to solve more problems, you got to solve different problems, and that needs to be part of a holistic whole that includes your marketing. But marketing alone is not going to fix fundamental business issues,
That's
right?
so
So
true.
anyhow, that's I think sort of the background thought process that gets missed sometimes, um, where, like, hey, let's just slap a layer of marketing over top of this and hope for the best, and then client ends up disappointed, agency ends up fired, and you don't have a great situation.
Yeah, the vicious cycle. I mean, what this is something I think founders and CEOs or marketers they know, but sometimes you have to explain to them just exactly what Google is or now AI. They're just exchanges, and there's supply and there's demand. The demand are the keywords, and you can look. I mean, it's all public information. You can actually see how much demand is for these problems. And on the supply side, this is where I think some people miss the mark. If they made a really very specific search, or they typed in a keyword or a key conversation on ChatGPT, and they actually get to your website. I mean, Google's going to rank you if you answer it well, but like, what a disappointment when their problem's not being addressed on that landing page, right? And so, like, did you outline? I mean, Google rewards you anyway if it's really well organized and thorough, but you have to speak to that problem. And what we find a lot with, particularly technical founders, is I'm solving a problem. I know there's a product market fit, but they're using acronyms and things that the client never would ever search, right? So, like, I'm sure within modular homes, they might be searching for something totally different than some of the acronyms that might be used in your industry.
All the time, all the time. And clients are searching one thing, or customers are searching one thing, and they mean a certain thing by it, and the builders understand a completely different thing, and they say, oh, we can't use that terminology because, you know whatever, we don't do, so for example, so some industries, building kits is a really big thing, and some founders are like, or some businesses are like, well, we're not sending necessarily an instruction manual along. We're not sure
Yeah.
we want to get into kits terminology, when really the person is looking for a package of building materials that they can have a contractor assemble on site. So if you're a lumber yard, like, you got to be going after some of these kits terminology, because the person's researching. They're maybe not set on like, hey, I need this packaged up with
Yeah.
IKEA instructions, right? They're
Yeah.
they're just
Yeah.
trying to figure out, like, I'm not hiring a contractor. I'm just trying to get a building package to certain specs. And so, like, being able to understand and bridge the gap between intent is the other big thing. Like, what problem are they trying to solve? They're coming to the search engine, they're not going to use the right terminology half the time, right?
Yeah.
Especially the more cutting edge the problem that you're solving, they're not really even going to know how to refer to it. They're not going to know what it's called. They might not even know that your particular business niche exists. And so, being able to bridge the gap between what the person said and what the person meant, and what you
Mhm.
offer, and doing that without, mispromising something in your copy, or mispromising something in your content. So yeah, it's honestly a lot of SEO, and maybe I'm taking this on a bunny trail, but a lot
Oh,
of
I love this. It's
SEO, but
great.
even broader than that, is really, you're filling knowledge gaps. And so there's knowledge gaps all the way from, um, you know, blind spots that the customer has in their search term, but even up to, they're researching. I mean, people don't build something on their property every day, so it's especially
Yeah.
true in that. People, even on your end, companies don't make a B2B SaaS purchase every day. There's a lot of research that goes into it. And so, if you can be the one to fill those knowledge gaps, talking about AI, like, that's how you protect yourself against AI. If you're just synthesizing and regurgitating what's out there, you're not filling a gap. You're just mixing what's already there. And as we all know by now, 3 years in, ChatGPT is a lot better at that than any of us
Yeah.
are. And so, if you have built your business on the synthesis of information, you're in big trouble now. If you've built your business on finding gaps in information and building workflows to fill those gaps, and
Uh,
actually get unique industry information in a way that's accessible and digestible to the people who are searching for it, you have a fundamental problem that you're solving. And it doesn't really matter if the vehicle for exchanging that information is a search engine or an AI result. And so that's
mm,
where, if you've built as an agency, if you've built on, hey, we solve this one really particular technical problem, change is scary, because the underlying technologies are going to change. If you're like, hey, we're really good at getting you into the local pack in Google search results, that could go away. I mean, we've seen how
right.
much, like, SERPs have evolved over the last 10 years. That could go away any day. Probably not any day, but, in a relatively quick
Well, it's
matter of
moving
time.
to different platforms. I mean, the UI is
Exactly.
much different. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you got to be able to zoom out and say, like, fundamentally, what problem are we solving? And then, like, let's use the tools at our disposal. As tech evolves, we evolve. But if you have a clear picture of who you're helping and how you're helping them, you just pick the tools that are most available and best suited to do that. And it's a lot easier, I think, to change with the times.
Yeah, James, I mean, what I love about this is you all are so fundamentally sound. With the advent of AI, we've seen, like what I would call lazy SEO, like just, one piece of content that fills one search word. What's now happening from the keywords is over these conversations, and what good SEO people used to do or still do, excuse me, is the keyword mapping. Like, you have your primary keyword, you have your secondary keywords, and you build out the strategic content plan around that. And if you do that, you get SEO results, but you also get the AI results, because you're covering all the different conversations that are having in the AI. So, like, when we do a shed or a modular home, I mean, there's this whole conversation. I have a spare piece of property. Might start with that conversation. What do I do with it? AI might suggest building a rental property on it, or a barn dominium, and then, like, oh, who's a barn dominium constructor near me? Like, that's a much different conversation than a keyword, just like find me barn dominiums, or find me, you know, spare plot of land. What do I do? I
Mhm.
think if you're doing that keyword mapping, thinking about what's going to happen on the client discovery side, excuse me, on the lead discovery side, so that you can actually show up for those results and have that authority. I'm sure you run into that all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's a Um, it varies too, depending on the competitiveness of the industry, right?
Sure.
And how
Yeah.
saturated the low end of the funnel is. It varies also in terms of like client budgets. Um, and so part of it is setting
Yeah.
realistic
The old
expectations and knowing
budgets.
like,
Yep.
hey, yeah, you come in with a low budget. Here's what you can realistically expect. Here's probably what you can go after. Here's what's going to be out of reach for you right now. Um, but businesses start and businesses grow. And so there's always, again, as long as you're solving fundamental problems for a set of people that have it and are willing to pay for it, there's room for growth. It's about getting in front of those people. Um, but being able to not bite off more than you can chew, being able to know what's realistic, and being able to
Yeah.
set those expectations. Expectation management, man, is like I don't know. I've kind of come to the belief that that's one of the biggest things that an
Yeah.
agency can do, and probably one of the places where agencies fall off the bandwagon or mess up way too often is just that expectation management. Especially, I think if your sales and fulfillment sides get too detached,
Yeah.
because sales then begins writing checks that fulfillment can't really cash.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think especially in anything performance marketing, there is it's an iterative approach, right? We're going to A/B test. We're going to try this strategy and we hope it works, but we got to give it 3 months and reevaluate. And will the client do they have the budget and the understanding to stick with you through these ups and downs? Because let's be honest, not everything works. I mean, the technology changes, the competitors outspend you. They're writing about the same things, right? They're looking at the same opportunity you are and writing about it, and they're jumping you. So
Mm-hmm.
these things happen. Any other thoughts on AI? How has AI changed at all, or anything right now at E Impact? Are you guys anything different, unique approaches, philosophies about it?
Yeah, I don't know how unique our philosophies are. I think we're maybe middle of the bell curve type people in
Uh,
that regard, where uh, I wouldn't say we're late adopters necessarily, but we're also probably not the earliest adopters to a lot of
uh,
things. That being said, yeah, we're working through it. I wear a number of different hats here. One of them
uh,
is COO, and then also CMO. So I kind of
Good
am
for
on
you.
both the sales and operations side, which I think back to the previous point is really helpful in keeping those two aligned and making sure we're not promising things in our initial
Uh,
consultations that like we can't really fulfill on the back end. Um, but I've found for myself personally, it's just really helpful for breaking down complex problems for me to know how to think about them. So this is not
uh,
even on the content generation side. This is just more like, okay, as a COO, here's certain business problems that I want to solve within our agency.
uh,
Here's my parameters. Here's my constraints. How would you go about solving this? Give me some ideas for solving this problem. It's not going to spit out anything perfectly fit, but it points me in the right direction versus hours of Googling, reading blog posts, and all that kind of stuff. And so, especially with the newer models, it's just so helpful. So I was working just like a week or two ago, like building some forecasting spreadsheets and some things like that. I'm not really, like I said, I came from doing roofs, okay, and like I'm not like a Excel spreadsheet guru, right? But it was able to develop formulas for me to
yeah.
say like, hey, here's some of the key metrics. Here's sort of how you need to measure it. And then I was able to go to some of our different platforms and figure out, okay, like how do I gather some of these metrics? How do I put them together? How do I actually write my Excel formulas so that it
Right.
gives me what I need? And you know, took a half day of work, but it would have taken quite a bit longer if I was
Yeah.
doing it from scratch, without any of that assistance. So that's just on a personal level, I think where I found it really helpful. It's really great with drafting, as you know, it's great with outlining. Um, some of the things that good writers know how to do.
Uh,
So I don't know how much AI is making good writers great, but it's making I think average writers better, if
uh,
that makes sense. And so even knowing like how do I here's the writing, here's the content, how would I order this in a way that's most logical, most useful? How
uh,
do I structure thoughts in a way that flows? Just some of that basic stuff, and saying, hey, here's my keywords, here's some of the questions we want to answer in this article, structure this in an outline. And then, of course, grammar stuff. I mean, like
yeah.
Grammarly, there's no reason to be shipping stuff that has spelling errors in it
Right.
these
Right.
days. Like that's just right. One other way that we're using it that's been really useful is for our internal knowledge base. So we have like a knowledge base or wiki that has a really tight Slack
Oh,
integration, and so we're actually able to query it from Slack uh, using AI to say like, hey, I have. So team members now can say like, hey, I have this question, and it goes and queries the knowledge base, so they don't have to go and find, oh, like, I wonder what category this would be listed under. It kind of overlaps a couple different categories. Where would this document live? Where do I go look for it? Doesn't document even exist? Because it's one thing to build a knowledge base, but to help people access it when they need it and to answer specific questions they have, it's a lot harder. I'm not saying we have that problem perfectly solved, but if people are able to just, uh, you know, query your own database
yes.
with an AI agent, it makes it a lot more realistic to say, I have this question, has it been answered before already? And it's really useful because it can even use AI to summarize Slack threads or questions that are answered in Slack. You can quickly turn it into a knowledge base answer
Mm.
so that it can be referenced in the future. So you're not, repetitively answering the same questions over and over. If you're at least a little bit disciplined about recording that the
I
first
love
time.
that. Yeah, we have all our SOPs in different Google Docs, but like having a wiki and having AI overlooking it and like being able to answer queries, that's powerful. That's a great idea.
This this one actually integrates with, just FYI, this one actually integrates with Workspace and with
Oh,
Google
good.
Drive. So you could actually link the two, and then it would allow you to use Slack to query to Slack plus an AI layer to query your Drive documents, your
That's
Google Doc
great.
documents. And I don't know if you saw it, but ChatGPT just released a beta Drive integration.
Oh,
Set
really?
it up like last
Interesting.
week. Yeah, so you can actually now you can have your organization query your Drive documents
Mm.
with the same permission levels that are set on the documents, so people can't necessarily like query stuff that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. So that just came out like within the last month, I
Wow.
think, from
Wow.
OpenAI, which is
Yeah,
cool.
we've been using the Gemini integration. I mean, it's been fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually
Yep.
pretty impressed with it. I mean, all the tools they keep leapfrogging each other and it's
Yeah.
super interesting. But like to your point, I think what's really cool about, from our perspective, the content, we don't like, there's got to be unique content, but like some of the boilerplate stuff that, it just needs to be, this is very standard information that we have to have on our website. Please just write this the way that we would write it. I think that's sort of, making those, they may not write for a living, but they can do a decent job with that type of
Mm-hmm.
content. I think that's really useful. We have noticed has made the really good writers way better. I mean, in our
Okay.
view, I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's actually research around coders. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great coders are early adopters to AI anyway, and they code better. But we have noticed, we have an outstanding writer here, but she crushes the AI and just puts her spin on it and
Mm-hmm.
just makes it better. But
Mm-hmm.
she is so much more productive. I've
Yeah,
been super impressed.
I should have maybe qualified like quality of writing and ideas
Mm-hmm.
versus productivity,
Totally,
because I
yeah,
do think there's huge productivity gains to be had
yeah,
by really good writers leveraging AI for the nitty gritty dirty work, so that they can spend more of their effort on that spin. I was saying, like, if you just give them side by side the
yeah.
same paragraph, I still think a great writer is going to be able to
A great writer's
produce
a great
something
writer.
as good or slightly better than what the AI can do. But AI plus a great writer is a super winning combination.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't tread on old content we just talked about, but like we're coming to the end. But I did want to ask, like, you get these small business owners that come to you, um, they're maybe hesitant about their spend. Like, what is the initial advice that you give people in terms of like, hey, you're about to dip your toe in this digital marketing, you have product market fit, and it's time. I know you want leads, but what is the talk track there in terms of like, what's the best advice you can give them? I know you're really
Mhm.
honest with them.
Yeah. Um, so one of the benefits of us like specializing in a couple really specific niches is we can say with a high degree of confidence, like, we typically see shed companies spend X% of revenue on marketing.
Yeah.
At least among our clients. There's of course outliers, but we can say like within, you know, in this industry, a lot are within 2 to 4%. Now it's trended up a little bit over the past few years. It was lower during COVID. This is actually one of the industries that had a crazy COVID boom when everybody was home and putting in,
Mm-hmm.
backyard office space. So that's fluctuated a bit. But the fact that we're seeing these patterns across dozens of similar businesses puts us in a unique position to speak
Yeah.
really, really confidently about what's typical and what we're seeing even regionally across the country. So that's one thing where we can say, hey, if the budget's too low, either I'll tell them, like, here's some really simple things you can do. I glanced at your Google business profile,
Yeah.
log on there, do these 5 things. You can do it yourself. You're not ready for an agency, you know. Um, Roughly we know what revenue level you kind of have to be at for it to make sense for you to bring a third party agency on, and we know kind of what sort of monthly commitment makes sense for us to actually be able to move the needle. And
Mm.
if those things all line up, then we can say, hey, we're probably a good fit. In terms of choosing strategies and where we actually go with it, um, in some ways it's become easier for localized businesses over the past few years, just with the increasing localization of search results. And again,
Mm.
you work with SaaS. I don't know how much you see this, or I don't know if you do much with local business, but it used to be, again, now we're talking 10 years ago, where you could write a page that says
Yeah.
plumbers near me,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
get a bunch of backlinks, and then you actually rank for plumbers near me, right?
You just put zip
And
codes all
thankfully,
over the website, all your cities that you're.
yeah, yeah. And so that's one of the huge benefits of AI that's been happening behind the scenes even prior to Chat GPT is
Mm.
just Google's semantic understanding of like, okay, person is located here. They said near me.
Mm.
And even now to the level where they understand how many providers of this are in a given area. So if you search, amusement parks near me, you're going to see a way wider radius than if you search barbers near me. Right. And so Google's understanding that has made it there's a few companies that did really well in the old days where they had huge market share, more than they probably should have, and they've seen a dip because of that. But it's made it a lot easier for your small local guy to say like, hey, I don't have to win across the country. I got to win in like my county, a few surrounding counties, depending on what type of business it is, and it's a lot easier. So our general strategy is start low funnel and work
Mm.
backwards. Now, again,
Always.
I could see this being different potentially in SaaS or in like extremely competitive um, industries that have maybe a way more mature marketing landscape. But for us, it's like, hey, the most qualified customers are the ones who are searching. In our case, sheds for sale near me, right?
100%.
They know what they need, they know what they're looking for. Make sure you're getting in front of them. And so your best bang for your buck is if you can get in front of the people who are ready to buy. You want to show up in front of the people who are
Yep.
most ready to buy
Perfect.
and work backwards from there. If you can show up for your most important commercial keywords in your most local area and then work outwards and work upwards in the funnel from there, that typically is where we see the best results.
James,
Okay.
I'm thank you for the time. It's always a pleasure. I love the story, the humble beginnings, the niching down. There's so many lessons learned here. I appreciate your time. So how can people find you? Are you on LinkedIn, your website? Maybe you can give out some of that information.
Sure. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know, James Charles. There's a famous YouTuber as well that I share a name with. So,
Yeah, let's not
he
do
might come
that.
up if
Yeah.
you just Google me.
Not him.
But if you search LinkedIn plus the company name, should find me pretty easily. And then company is eImpact Marketing. Website is eImpact, all one word, dot marketing. That's the
All
URL.
right.
And yeah, we're on the socials a little bit. Honestly, we don't have the most built out social media presence. Um, it's just not the angle that we've really focused on. So we're a lot more about yeah, in person calls, consultations, and this kind of thing. And then like we get out to trade shows and do face to face interaction with people. Um, but yeah, that's where we're at, and pretty easy to get a hold of. And I can be emailed as well. If you send an email through the contact info on the website, it'll get to me probably one way or another.
I love it. And also, if you are in construction in Pennsylvania, just ask a friend. They'll probably tell you about eImpact. I love it. So,
Yeah, word gets around.
I love it. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too, Nick. Great talking.
Cool.